I don't hike alone anymore. That decision wasn't gradual. It wasn't maturity. It wasn't responsibility. It was one night in the Cherokee National Forest. This happened about 8 years ago. I was in my mid-20s. No wife, no kids, nothing tying me down. Back then, I did 2 or 3 solo backcountry trips a year. I deliberately picked trails with limited traffic, hike past the last reliable campsite, then go further. I liked knowing there was no cell service, no headlights, no one within miles. I told people it was peaceful. The truth is I liked the isolation. This particular trip started perfectly. Clear skies, cool air, almost no foot traffic. By the second afternoon, I hadn't seen another person in over 24 hours. I was maybe 8 miles past the nearest marked shelter, following a narrow trail that climbed steadily along a ridge. That's when the weather shifted. At first it was subtle, a temperature drop that didn't match the forecast. Then the wind picked up in uneven gusts. Within 40 minutes, dark clouds had rolled in thick enough to swallow the sun. The kind of sudden Appalachian storm that doesn't build politely, it arrives. I checked my map. I was in a stretch with very little natural cover. No rock overhangs. No dense pine clusters. Just exposed hardwood forest. The rain hit hard and fast. Not drizzle, sheets. The trail turned slick within minutes. Wind snapped branches somewhere overhead. Lightning struck close enough that I felt it in my chest before I heard it. I started looking for anything, a depression, fallen tree cover, something to wait it out. That's when I saw it. Through the trees to my left, about 50 yards off trail. A structure. At first I thought it was a trick of light, but as I angled toward it, the outline became clear. A small cabin. 1 story. Weathered wood. Metal roof. Almost swallowed by the forest. It didn't look maintained. It looked forgotten. I won't lie, I felt immediate relief. I jogged toward it, boots slipping in mud. The door was shut but not secured. I knocked once out of habit. No response. I pushed it open. Inside was dim and stale but dry. The place smelled wrong. Not rot. Not mold. Something sharper, metallic almost, though faint. There was almost no furniture. A basic wooden chair. A narrow table. A rusted cot frame against the back wall. A stone fireplace choked with old ash. It looked abandoned. I stepped fully inside and shut the door behind me. The storm roared against the metal roof so loudly it drowned out everything else. I peeled off my soaked outer layer and set my pack down. Water pooled on the wooden floor beneath me. For the first 10 minutes, I didn't explore. I just sat there, catching my breath, grateful to be out of the lightning. When the adrenaline eased, curiosity took over. I turned on my headlamp and looked more carefully. That's when I noticed the sleeping bag. It was rolled tight near the cot frame. It wasn't new, but it wasn't decades old either. The fabric still had color. There was also a half-full plastic water jug on the table. 2 dented food cans beside it. Someone had used this place. Recently enough. That didn't bother me at first. Hunters use old structures all the time. So do other backpackers. Then I saw the marks on the wall. They were beside the door frame. Dozens of them. At first glance they looked like gouges from age or shifting wood. But they weren't random. They were clustered. Vertical. Uneven depth. Like fingernails dragged down repeatedly. I moved closer. Some were shallow. Some had cut into the wood almost a 1/4 inch. I turned slowly toward the door. It had a simple interior latch. Nothing unusual there. But when I opened it again to check the frame, I saw something that tightened my chest. There was a heavy metal bracket mounted on the outside of the door frame. A bracket designed for a padlock. On the outside, there was no internal mechanism to secure it from within. The door could only be locked from outside. I stepped back inside and shut it again, slower this time. My eyes moved to the window. Single pane. Surprisingly intact. That didn't make sense given the age. Then I saw the screws. 4 long screws drilled through the frame from outside, sealing it shut. I ran my fingers along the inner edges of the frame. More scratches. These deeper than the ones by the door. Splintered wood around them. Not decorative. Not accidental. Force. I remember standing there in silence while the storm hammered the roof, and feeling something shift in my head. This wasn't just an old shelter. At some point, someone had been kept in here. That thought didn't arrive dramatically. It arrived slowly, logically. The outside lock. The sealed window. The claw marks. and the sleeping bag. I considered leaving, but outside was violent lightning, falling limbs, zero visibility. Inside was dry and quiet, aside from the storm. I told myself whatever had happened here was old. The scratches looked aged. The sleeping bag was dusty. The water jug cloudy with time. I convinced myself I was safe. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour. The storm intensified. Rain struck the roof so hard it blurred into a constant metallic roar. That's why it took me so long to notice the other sound. A scraping noise. Left side of the cabin. Faint at first. Intermittent. I froze and listened. It came again, slower this time. Like something dragging across wood. I told myself it was a branch. Went. Debris. Then two heavy thuds hit the porch. Not sharp. Not like falling limbs. Waited. Intentional. I stood. My heart rate spiked instantly. The storm masked most external sound, but those impacts cut through. I stared at the door. If someone was outside, why wouldn't they just come in? It wasn't locked. That thought lingered. The scratching returned. Closer to the window now. I refused to look through it. I don't know why, but something in me knew that if someone was out there, they'd be looking in. I stayed frozen for what felt like minutes. Then it stopped. No more scratching. No more thuds. Just rain. I started to calm down. I even felt embarrassed for jumping to conclusions. And that's when the pressure came. The door bowed inward slightly. Not violently. Just pressure. As if someone leaned their full weight against it. The latch rattled once. Then the pressure lifted. That was worse than if they tried to break in. Because whoever was out there knew the door wasn't locked. And they weren't coming in. They were testing it. Or making sure I stayed. My thoughts shifted rapidly. What if this wasn't random? What if this cabin wasn't abandoned? What if someone used it? Not for shelter, but for something else. I didn't debate anymore. I started stuffing my gear back into my pack. Fast. Hands shaking. I'd rather take my chances in the storm than in that room. I was maybe 20 seconds from opening the door when the window exploded. Glass shattered inward. Something struck the far wall and dropped. For half a second I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw liquid spreading across the wooden floor. And fire followed it instantly. The flames moved unnaturally fast. Too fast for dry wood in heavy rain conditions. The smell hit next. Chemical. Accelerant. The entire left wall ignited. I lunged for the door. It wouldn't move. Jammed from outside. I hit it with my shoulder once. Twice. On the third impact the hinges tore loose from the rotted frame and the entire door collapsed outward with me. Cold rain slammed into my face. I scrambled up and ran. I didn't look back at first. I just ran blind through trees and mud and branches. Behind me the cabin was fully engulfed within seconds. In a thunderstorm. That's not normal. I'd gone maybe 50 yards when something hit me from behind. I went face first into mud. Someone landed on top of me. No words at first. Just breath. Hot. Close. Hands grabbing for my throat. We struggled in the rain and darkness. I couldn't see his face. Just weight and force. He didn't say anything coherent. Just strained noises. I managed to roll and kick free long enough to shove him off balance. Then I ran again. This time I did look back. I saw the cabin, a full fireball against black woods. I didn't see him. That was worse. I ran until my legs collapsed. I hid under two fallen trees that had wedged together, creating a narrow, dry pocket. I stayed there for hours. I don't know if he searched for me. I don't know if he watched. I just know I didn't move until daylight. I found a trail by accident sometime mid-morning and followed it out. A stranger at a trailhead drove me to a hospital. Second-degree burns on my forearm and neck. Smoke inhalation. Nothing permanent. I reported everything. The location wasn't on an official map. They couldn't find a record of a cabin in that area. After a follow-up call or two, it stalled. No remains were ever documented. No fire report. No missing person records tied to that area. I never told my wife. She thinks I stopped solo hiking because I settled down. That's easier. The only thing I know for certain is this. That cabin was prepared. The window was sealed from outside. The door was designed to lock from outside. And it ignited too quickly in a rainstorm for it to be accidental. Someone had used that structure before. And I don't think I was the first person who took shelter there during a storm. If we hadn't made that noise, I don't think anyone would have found us. Or maybe they already knew we were there. This happened when I was 22. Back when no trespassing signs felt more like suggestions than warnings. I had a friend named Charles who treated abandoned structures like scavenger hunts. If there was a decommissioned factory, an old hospital wing, or a place Google Maps barely labeled, he'd already saved the coordinates. Most of our friends thought he was reckless. I thought he was interesting. One Friday afternoon, he texted me a satellite screenshot of a clearing deep in a forest about 3 hours from us. In the center of the clearing was a fire lookout tower. Tall, isolated. No visible road leading to it. Still standing, he wrote. Let's spend the night up there. I should have said no. Instead, I asked what time we were leaving. We parked along a Forest Service road and hiked in just after noon. The trail faded about a mile in, and from there we navigated by GPS and terrain. The woods were quiet in that way that feels natural at first, then gradually feels staged, like something's waiting for you to stop talking. When we finally saw the tower through the trees, it felt unreal. It rose above the canopy, a thin metal skeleton with a small cab at the top. Maybe 70 feet high. Rusted in places. Graffiti near the base. No fencing. No signage. Just there. Forgotten. The staircase zigzagged upward in sections. Some railings were bent. A few bolts looked corroded. It did not look stable. Charles was already climbing before I finished inspecting the base. I followed. The higher we got, the more the forest swallowed itself beneath us. By the time we reached the final vertical ladder, about 20 feet of straight climb inside a narrow metal cage, I had to force myself not to look down. The cab at the top was small. Windows on all 4 sides. Empty inside except for old debris and a metal cabinet bolted to one wall. The view was incredible. Miles of uninterrupted forest. No roads. No buildings. Just green stretching into haze. We timed it perfectly. The sun was dropping. For about an hour, it felt like the best decision we'd ever made. We sat on the wraparound platform outside the cab, legs hanging over the edge, drinking warm beer and watching the sky shift from gold to purple to black. Once night settled fully, the forest below turned into a solid mass of darkness. No ambient light. No distant headlights. Nothing. Charles got bored first. He grabbed his metal water bottle and smacked it hard against one of the support beams. The clang echoed violently through the frame. It traveled down the tower like a tuning fork. It felt louder than it should have been. I swore at him immediately. He just laughed. Then he stopped laughing. "Hey," he said quietly. "Come here." His tone had changed completely. I walked over. He was pointing toward the forest below, diagonally off to the east. There was a light. Faint at first. Just a small white glow weaving through the trees. It took my brain a second to register it as movement. Someone was walking down there. My first thought was that we'd been heard. That someone nearby had seen or heard the tower vibrate and came to investigate. I whispered that we were idiots. Charles didn't respond. He was studying it. "Look at it," he said. I did. The light wasn't swinging like a flashlight normally would. It wasn't bobbing or arcing. It moved at a steady, consistent height. Perfectly level. Almost smooth. "Maybe it's just far away," I said. Neither of us sounded convinced. We watched in silence. After a few minutes, it was obvious the light was getting closer. Not wandering. Not circling. Approaching. The movement remained steady until it didn't. For a split second, it jumped forward. Not gradually. Not like someone speeding up. It skipped. Like a glitch in motion. Then it resumed its steady pace. My mouth went dry. 10 minutes later, the light reached the clearing beneath us. It stopped directly at the base of the tower. We couldn't see whoever was holding it. From our angle, we could only see the glow itself. No voice called up. No footsteps on metal. Nothing. Just the light. Charles, in his infinite wisdom, leaned over the railing and shouted, "Hey, you good?" The forest swallowed his voice. No reply. The light didn't move. He yelled again. Still nothing. Now the reality of the situation settled in. We were 70 feet up. The staircase was the only way down. And someone, or something, was standing at the base of it, blocking our exit. We stared at that light for nearly half an hour. It didn't shift position. It didn't dim. It didn't react. Finally, I grabbed my flashlight and shined it straight down. The beam reached the base. I could see the metal supports, the dirt, the lower beams, but I couldn't see a person. The light below remained visible, but there was no body attached to it. It made no sense. Eventually we stepped back inside the cab. We left the door cracked so we could still see the base. At some point during our hushed argument about what to do next, I looked down again. The light was gone. No fading. No movement away. Just gone. Charles immediately relaxed. Said whoever it was must have left. I felt worse. If someone had been there and now we couldn't see them, that meant they were still somewhere in the dark. And we were the only elevated structure for miles. We decided to stay inside the cab for the rest of the night. Neither of us planned on sleeping. About 20 minutes after closing the door, we heard the first sound. A metallic clang. It resonant. It vibrated up through the tower's frame and into the floor beneath us. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't climbing. It sounded like someone striking one of the support beams with something heavy. We froze. A few minutes later, another sound. This one was longer. A grinding scrape. Metal against metal. It lasted several seconds. Then silence. Then another clang from a different section of the tower. The sounds weren't random. They were moving, circling, testing. We whispered about what we'd do if someone started climbing. There would be no way to hide. We positioned ourselves against the door inside the cab. If anyone tried to force entry, they'd have to push through both of us. The windows made it worse. Too many angles. Too many blind spots. At some point, while staring through the glass toward the tree line, I saw something pass across the window. A shape. Dark against dark. It moved from one pane to the next. Too tall to be an animal. Too smooth to be branches. I yelled before I realized I was yelling. Charles scrambled away from the window. We pressed ourselves against the door and waited. No knocking. No handle turning. Just the wind. And our breathing. The metallic noises continued intermittently for what felt like hours. Then gradually they stopped. We didn't move until the sky started to lighten. When dawn finally came, everything looked normal. So quiet. I counted to 3 and swung the door open hard. No one stood outside. We circled the platform. Nothing. We started descending immediately. About 3/4 of the way down, Charles stopped so suddenly I nearly ran into him. He was staring at the next section of stairs. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't loose. It was gone. An entire section of staircase, roughly 8 steps, had been removed. Not broken. Removed. Clean separation where bolts should have been. There was now a gap between landings wide enough that we'd have to jump. We just stood there staring. The metallic noises from the night clicked into place. Someone had been disassembling the tower while we were inside it. But that didn't line up. We would have heard bolts dropping, metal clattering to the ground, and the sounds had continued even after I saw that shape at the window, which meant whoever, or whatever, had crossed that gap had done it in the dark. Twice. We didn't debate long. We jumped. I made it clean. Charles landed awkwardly and twisted his ankle but stayed upright. We didn't look for the missing stairs. We didn't check the ground thoroughly. We just left. There was nothing at the base of the tower. No tools. No lights. No footprints that we could identify. The forest looked untouched. To this day we still talk about it. The light that moved wrong. The metal being struck in different places. The silhouette at the window. And the fact that someone removed part of a steel staircase in the middle of the night without us ever clearly hearing it happen. I've gone back to that area once. The tower was gone. Not demolished. Not replaced. Just gone. No record of removal that I could find. And no one I spoke to even acknowledged it had ever been there. I don't scare easily in the woods. I've been camping alone for almost 15 years. I understand normal forest sounds. I know what wind through hardwood sounds like. I know how animals move at night. I carry a rifle, not because I'm paranoid, but because being alone miles from the nearest road requires preparation. What happened 2 years ago in eastern Kentucky is the only time I've ever left early, and I still don't know what I walked away from. I drove into the Daniel Boone National Forest on a Thursday morning, parked at a trailhead off a gravel Forest Service road. No other vehicles. That's usually a good sign. The plan was simple: 3 nights in the backcountry. Clear my head. No phone service. Just hiking and sleeping. The first day was exactly what I needed. 7 miles in, found a flat patch near a shallow creek bed, set up my tent, built a small fire, cooked, drank 1 beer, watched the fire burn down to coals. I was asleep by 10. I woke sometime after midnight. There wasn't a loud noise, no snap of a twig, no footsteps. It was just that sudden alertness you get in unfamiliar places, like your brain checks the room. Except I was in a tent. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed a faint orange glow filtering through the nylon. I unzipped the flap slowly. About 200 yards away through the trees there was a fire. Small, contained, flickering steadily. Not wildfire, not lightning, a campfire. I watched it for several minutes, waiting to hear voices, laughter, the murmur of conversation, even coughing. Nothing. The fire burned evenly. No sparks, no flare-ups. I considered walking toward it right then, but common sense stopped me. If someone else was out there, they clearly wanted space. Eventually, I zipped tent closed and went back to sleep. It didn't feel threatening. Just strange that I hadn't noticed another camper nearby during the day. The next morning, the fire was the first thing on my mind. I packed up and walked toward where it had been. The distance was about right. 10 minutes of light brush and I reached a natural clearing that matched the angle I'd seen from. But there was nothing there. No ash, no stone ring, no scorched earth, no disturbed leaves. I walked the clearing twice. The ground looked untouched, like no one had stepped there in months. I stood still for a while, trying to reconstruct the line of sight from my tent. I was confident about the direction, but the evidence wasn't there. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd misjudged distance in the dark. It happens. I moved on. The second campsite was deeper in. The terrain climbed steadily. The trees grew older, taller. The canopy thick enough that daylight felt filtered and distant. It was quieter there. I set up camp around 4 p.m. That night, I let my fire die early, climbed into my tent before 10. Sometime deep into the night, a sound ripped me out of sleep. It started with a crack. Loud, sure. Then it continued, splintering, tearing like something massive under stress. It lasted several seconds before ending in a deep, concussive thud that I felt through the ground. The tree had fallen. I've heard trees fall before. It's rare, but unmistakable. What bothered me was the complete lack of wind. The air had been still all evening. I lay there, heart racing, listening for aftermath. Nothing. Then, maybe 10 minutes later, it happened again. Same violent crack. Same cascading break of branches. But this time it was closer, and from a different direction. The first had been south of me. This one came from northwest. 2 separate trees. 2 separate directions. No wind. I sat upright. Now it felt wrong. I tried to reason through it. Root failure? Soil shift? Animals? A delayed collapse from age? Maybe. But the timing didn't sit right. I was still replaying it in my head when a new sound started. Oh, continuous. It wasn't a roar. Not exactly. More like a sustained, resonant groan. Almost mechanical. It didn't rise and fall like an animal call. It didn't echo naturally. Just howled. Like something pushing air through a narrow space. It lasted close to a minute. Unbroken. I grabbed my rifle and chambered around as quietly as possible. I aimed it toward the tent flap and sat there, barely breathing. The sound didn't stop abruptly. It faded, as if whatever was making it moved farther away. Then the forest went completely silent. Not even insects. I didn't sleep again. At first light, I packed immediately. Before leaving, I decided to find the closer fallen tree. Part of me needed proof I hadn't imagined it. It took about 10 minutes of careful walking to spot it. The trunk was massive, easily 2 feet thick, lying across a shallow slope. Broken branches scattered outward. It had definitely fallen recently. I approached the stump. That's when things shifted from unsettling to wrong. The break wasn't clean. It wasn't a typical splintered shear from wind stress. The wood looked worked. That's the only word I can use. Long grooves cut into the exposed trunk at multiple angles. Some of them deep. Not parallel like tool marks. Not smooth like saw cuts. Irregular. Aggressive. The bark around the base had been peeled away in strips. The exposed wood beneath had the same gouged appearance. It didn't look chewed the way beavers leave wood. It didn't look pecked like woodpecker damage. It looked torn. Systematically. I stepped around the trunk slowly. That's when I saw something near a cluster of branches. 2 items sitting in the dirt. A blue bandana and a silver carabiner. Both mine. I froze. I checked my pack immediately. They were missing. Those items had been clipped to an outer loop the night before. They weren't essential, easy to overlook, but I hadn't removed them. I stood there staring at them on the ground. They hadn't been dropped. They'd been placed, close enough for me to notice, far enough to suggest intent. The first night's fire snapped back into my mind. The trees falling from 2 directions. The sustained groan. My gear being touched. Whoever, or whatever, had been out there knew exactly where I was. I didn't examine the second fallen tree. I didn't look for tracks. I grabbed my things and left. Not a brisk walk. I moved fast. Faster than I should have under a loaded pack. The entire hike back felt compressed. Every snapped twig behind me made my pulse spike. More than once, I thought I heard movement pacing me off trail. Never saw anything. Never heard breathing. Just presence. I kept my rifle in my hands the entire way. I reached my car mid-afternoon. No other vehicles. No indication anyone else had been there. I drove until I had signal and called local authorities. I explained what I'd found. The officer sounded polite, but unconvinced. Trees fall. Animals strip bark. Campers misplace gear. Maybe. But here's what doesn't sit right with me. The first night's fire had no physical trace. The trees fell in separate directions under calm conditions. The trunk damage didn't match any animal activity I've ever seen. And my items were removed from my pack and placed deliberately near the fallen tree. That means something approached my campsite while I slept. Close enough to reach my gear. Close enough to decide what to take.